Ellie here. Check, check.
That's all right. And the camera seems to be working.
Okay. Let's try that again. Things don't work unless they're plugged in. It's the lesson of the day. Welcome to Lunch with Books. If you're not on our mailing list, if you'd like to know what programs are coming up, just fill out a form over there on that table and put it in that little box, please. This Friday, so the next two programs are Christmas related. And first up is Friday at 1 p.m., which is an unusual time for us. So 1 p.m. Mike Florio will be back. Remember Mike? You might see him on NBC football broadcasts. He's from Wheeling and he wrote a book. This one is called On Our Way Home. He calls it a cross between A Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life. So glowing praise for his own book. We'll see. He'll be here Friday. And then on Tuesday, we have a music program. They were here last year, the Major Brothers. They play like jazz style, peanut style Christmas. And their dad will be with them, and he'll be playing the bass this time. So that'll be the 19th at noon. So, the Benwood Mill, my grandfather worked there many years ago, and so did thousands of other people. And so that's what we're here to talk about today. Gary Ryder is a retired public school teacher in Marshall County. He's the author and originator of now, I would say 13.
13, yes.
13 volume book series, Marshall County Patriots. and Heroes of Marshall County Postcard History. And they have a new book called Fostorian Memories, I think. And he's currently employed as a part-time staff member at the Moundsville Public Library. Roseanna Dakan Keller is retired from Bayer, as they say, where she was Human Rights Resources Director. She's now involved in Marshall County Schools as a foster grandparent volunteer at Washington Lands Elementary School and a patient volunteer at Valley Hospice. So here they are. Gary, you starting? Here's Gary.
Well, welcome to Lunch with Books. We are honored to be here again. How many of you all worked at Benwood Mill? No, I'm scared. Because if I don't get it right, you're going to tell me afterwards. So we're going to do our best. We call it Memories of Benwood Still, like we have Memories of Fostoria, Memories of Mark's Toys. We are working on Memories of Reynolds Memorial Hospital now because WVU has taken it over. So we're doing a whole series of these, and we're very proud and honored that people respond to us and tell us their stories, and we can include them in our books. And we're going to present some things to you today. Hopefully my slide thing works. Okay. Sean left me. All right, I need, there we go. All right, it took time. It's on lag. All right. We started an effort to save the stories of the businesses. Those of you who are not aware, this was called.
One second.
Okay.
I'll get you fixed up.
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I'm not techie.
Now you're good.
I'm not a techie. Okay. I did this slide presentation, which scares me to death. Because my staff was busy and I couldn't get them to do it. So we began this just as a thing. I worked at Mark's and I wanted to know what it did more, what it was like to work at Mark's. I wanted to know what it was like to work at U.S. Stamping. I wanted to know what it was like to work at Fostoria. I wanted to know what it was like to be at Benwood Mill. You can find Mark's Toy Plant, Lewis Marks, Benwood Mill, owned by United States Steel. But what about the people who were inside the plant? What about the people who made it function, who produced the steel, who produced the toys, who produced the products that made this valley successful? And people often ask us at Moundsville, why are you called Miracle Valley Library? Think of all the business that's been here, coal mines, chemical plants, all the products that we produced, and we were a miracle. There were jobs galore in the Ohio Valley. If you worked at the mill, you were happy at the mill, and you stayed there. And you may, when it closed, have gone to other mills, but you were reluctant or you were on the outside because you were a Benwood worker. And you wound up in Yorkville or somewhere else, and you were always an outsider. Your home was Benwood. Well, what was it like for those? What was it like to be part of that family? And so the series talks about these stories of the businesses, and we're proud to save these because our valley has changed so dramatically. So it began in 1853 as Riverside Iron Works. 1853, it goes clear back to then. It made wire and iron axles. And then it closed. And then in 1858, they reopened it. More wire, more iron axles, spikes for railroads. It burned down. So it has an unusual history at the beginning. In 1860, they built it back up, and they started the Wheeling Iron and Spike Works. And so when you go back, this is an old drawing that one of my old students brought into me and shows the mill on the right side of the river and all the steamboat traffic and all that. I mean, just a hand sketch of the valley. And these things are laying around. These people have this stuff. They collected these things. And they didn't know why. They just were collectors. And today the value comes out, that we can show you these things. This would be an aerial view of it, taken by Dr. Durig in his airplane at that time. If you would ask a little kid today, they'd say, man, that drone took a pretty good picture of that. Sorry, there were no drones back then. But that shows you the rails coming across. That shows you how big it was. It goes clear up to the hillside, right up the old Route 2. And it was an enormous plant. And still is when you look at it. It's still being used. It's still being used by Level Tech. Level Tech is in there doing metal work, fabricating. They take metals, and one of the things that Level Tech works, one of the companies they work for is SpaceX. Elon Musk is paying them to make metal for his spaceships out of Benwood Mill. You said we're not still important. This was the office. Most of you guys recognize the office who went there, and you also see on the right side of it the pay windows, where you went up and you got in line by alphabet and you got your paycheck, and the secretaries went in there and gave you your pay once a week, and then you went on those and got your Boilermaker and then cashed your check and went home. How many of you got a Boilermaker? You won't admit to it. You, all right, one brave soul. Got your Boilermaker, went home, and Roseanna's going to talk about those. It's quite a unique history. We're proud that Perks Marchand shared all that stuff with us. In 1866, it became the nail mill. They made nails, and we were the premier place to make nails in the country. The nail factory. So somebody came to Wheeling the other day and asked somebody on the streets, why are they called the Wheeling Nailers? Don't know. I'll go back in your history. It's the Wheeling Nail Factory. They made the nails for the entire country. They were productive, yes. So our history is long and rich here. In 1875, it became the Riverside Iron Works, and from there on, Benwood Mill, and then U.S. Steel, and then finally in 1982, they closed it down. The pipe was used in oil and gas fields. When they got to the mill part of it, they set it on pipe. And it was mainly used in the gas fields and the oil fields. The pipe was guaranteed. John Karenbauer told me that they hydrostatically tested it, correct? Hydrostatically tested the pipes. And if they blew, then they didn't send it out as a product. It was a guaranteed product. So if you sent that to the oil field and then the pipe failed, then Benwood Mill would pay to have that pipe replaced in the ground because the one they sent you failed. And they were very careful about that because of that guarantee. And they were well known for this. They were one of the biggest producers of pipe for the gas and oil fields in the country. Shipped it out by rail all the time, by trucks. This was a big business for Benwood and Macon. This is why the town was there. The town today, when you look at these, they're kind of shadows that are left. There are some businesses there, but it's a shadow town. The bars are gone that thrives off of the mill. The businesses are gone that sold the clothing to the workers. The food stores are gone. You know, it was a big town based on this, and they lived and breathed the mill. That was their life. And because of that, we wanted to get into it and preserve that history, and we almost waited too late because we couldn't find a number of workers, and now all you guys are here that we didn't talk to. It's kind of like, gee, how come we missed you? We'd like to put you in the book, but we didn't make it. I'm sorry. But we wanted to tell the story of what you went through when you went in. Obviously, you can see it's a hot, hazardous job. It is a lot of fire, it's a lot of heat, it's a lot of liquid metal flowing. And because of that, there were injuries, some significant, some lives lost. And it was not something you went into lightly. You paid attention to whatever was going on around you. That's what a lot of the workers said. You focus on what was going on around you, the cranes overhead, the pipe coming through, what was happening to the pipe. If that pipe wasn't run properly, it was spaghetti. Any of you guys have spaghetti pipe that you had to work with? Okay. And it would just shoot out there and just start to mangle. And the only way you could stop it was to hit the button that you wore. So one guy told me it started to shoot up and started to just go every which way, which means the pipe was useless. And he hit the button and it didn't stop it. So he went over to the machine and hit the button and it didn't stop it. It was still coming out. And I don't know how many feet per minute it came out, but it was an enormous amount of pipe. It just kept building up and bending. And then what happened was he went to the foreman and told him, I can't stop the machines. He said, well, why not? And he got in trouble for that because the foreman said, you could stop that with the buttons. He said, they don't work. They didn't work this time. And so when they went back and discovered the buttons failed, then the guy was in trouble. And now they had to shut that particular line down and go in with their torches and cut out all that pipe, which would take days to cut out that pipe. Because depending on how long you let it run, I'm going to say about 1,200 feet of pipe per minute. You get 4 or 5 minutes of that. You got all that to cut out. And it is hot, hard work. And John Cabansi told me some of us shot onto his leg one time. And luckily he had on his proper pants. And he got a severe burn, yes. But he didn't lose a leg. I mean, he went to the hospital and then went back to work shortly thereafter. But yeah, this pipe can burn you severely. And it was dangerous work, as you can see by these pictures. That would be a picture of the mill itself. It's a huge structure. Probably has not changed inside because I've seen the pictures of Level Tech, and it looks pretty much like that as far as the inside structure. That building, which was the office building, is now the professional building in Benwood. So those of you who went to work each day would go in through the clock office. Clock in, go through the security guard, go by the nursing station, do whatever, go in, do your job, and come back and clock out. The hospital building was there. They had their own nurses on staff because of the injuries that could occur. Burns were quite frequent. And then the nurses were there to take care of them. If my memory is correct, I think they used some liquid skin sometimes to help cover the burns. And then the truck entrance, but that is one of the original pictures of it, the general view looking into that in 1962. Some of the workers we found, some of the pictures, some other people brought some pictures today. Thank you very much. They're up here. They're not in the book, so if you want to look at them, the one is the Benwood Mill people on the left, and the other one is a larger one of the Steel Society, I believe. Very nice, wonderful pictures, and they are rather old for the people who are in there. Yes, so thank you so much for that. And you brought an 1895 certificate today of the original certificate starting the mill in 1895. He's going to donate that to Sean today for the library to place in their collection. Faces of local mill workers. Remember when this was a Marshall County thing that the Historical Society did, and they would put these pictures in. Oftentimes they could not identify the people in the pictures, but this was one that we latched onto. The work was done by machines. So you just kind of ran the machines and stood by that area, watching that things were going properly. These are the pipes that have come off the line. They're being hydrostatically tested. If that pipe fails to test, then it's rejected. And I think they scrapped them, and I don't think they reused them. I may be wrong on that, but that was the guarantee. That pipe has to pass the pressure test, and then it was capped on each end, and then it was sent out. There were quotas that you had to meet, and so you take the coils, and I'll show you that in a minute. You take the coils, they melt them, they run them down through the line there. That is your hot liquid formed into pipes, and then that comes out and that is sent along and it's cooled. There's several processes that take place here. It's not just make the pipe, it's coated, it's labeled, it's numbered, it's sized. All these things take place. And these guys were experts in their field. They knew what they were doing. It's like any other businesses, whether you're making toys, whether you're making glass. This is artistic work. This is not something just anybody can pop in and do off the street. You have to have talent to do this because you have to know how to work with steel. It's very, very important that you do a good job because the name of the company is on the line. Here's a gentleman using one of the cranes to lift the product, to send it off to be sent away. And that has been tested, that has been ready to go. It has been approved, all the stuff has been done to it, and it is set. When did you start working at the mill? Well, if you were a young kid in Benwood Mill and your dad got killed in the mill or got killed in the coal mine, and you were 9 or 10 years old, and that's about the youngest that we found, and that goes back to the early 1900s. You could be 9 years old and go to work in the mill. Now, you're not working with the hot steel. You're not working on the line. You're carrying water. You're sweeping. And they give you a job to help you because they know you've got mom at home who's lost her husband, and you've got brothers and sisters, and you're the oldest one, and you need to make money. And so they came to the mill, and they gave them jobs. They did at the Fostoria also. One young boy had, he was 9, he didn't have shoes. They wouldn't let him inside at the Fostoria until he got enough money to buy shoes. And he got 40 cents a week. So can you imagine in the early 1900s how much a lad working in the mill is going to get to sweep the floors and carry water to these guys? And water was very important. One of the things that several workers said was we had cold water. It was cold water. It was good because it was hot work. In the summertime, they took the sides off the building and just opened it up. And that allowed the air to come through because of this work. And you were covered in clothing and equipment because this was dangerous work. You couldn't go in a short sleeve shirt. You couldn't go in shorts. You couldn't go in tennis shoes. You had to have steel-toed shoes. You had to have the proper equipment. Otherwise, you were going to suffer some severe injuries here. So you must be careful. The shops we discovered were often ethnic shops, and you can agree or disagree, but this is an opinion that one person gave me. He said that if you wanted to be in a shop and you weren't a certain nationality, then you didn't get in that shop. And that was just the way it was at the mill. Whether that's completely valid everywhere, I can't attest to that, but that's kind of the way it worked. And these are the coils that they would take, and they would melt them down, and they would form a pipe. There's your pipe. That's the main product of different sizes. Was there stealing? Was that a factor that hurt Benwood Mill? And they're smiling. Was there stealing? No, never. All honest as the day is long, right? One gentleman who ran a crane picked the stacks up, and he would lift them onto the railroad cars, or he would lift them onto the trucks. And he said, we got the crane there, and we couldn't lift this one load. Well, that was thousands of pounds, and it wouldn't lift it at all, it wouldn't budge. So he went down, and he said, I started looking at the pipe. Why wouldn't it lift it? Well, inside the large pipe, they had stashed smaller pipes. And inside that pipe, they'd stashed another one. And so it's like 3 pipes in one. So when it's time to pick it up, the crane wouldn't lift it. So he asked the foreman, he said, I can't get it on. He said, you figure a way to get it on there, put this one out. So they did. And I didn't want to report him because I'd probably been the one that was fired because he was the foreman. I was doing what he told me to do. Yeah, there was that going on. You didn't leave your tools behind, because if you lost them, you had to buy new tools. So you did not leave those unattended. You put them in your locker and you locked it. And you were very careful with that because their tools are very specialized, very expensive tools. Why did it close? Then I'll tell you a couple other stories and we'll go to Roseanna. It closed to foreign competition. That was the main thing. It closed to foreign competition. Triangle Conduit bought pipe from Brazil. Think about that. It was cheaper for Triangle Conduit to bring in piping from Brazil and South America than to go 10 miles up the road and buy pipe off Benwood Steel. Yeah. Was it due to the union? No, the union was asking for fair wages. They weren't overpaid. They were paid for their work, for their skill. They were not overpaid. It's just a foreign competition working for nothing destroyed them. Okay, and that's sad that a company like Triangle Conduit and others would buy from a foreign country like that instead of buying right up the road and supporting American business and keep the communities going. And that was a big factor in its failure.
Hey, Jerry, when that happened, Benwood, the shipping guys allowed all products to be shipped out of primary. So it missed going in a railroad car, it missed coming out of a railroad car, it missed getting on the tables down the shipping or whatever, the railroad. So he took like 5 or 6 steps out of that whole process. Shipping guys came up in the primary. Loaded those in a rail car, on and on. So we still couldn't get it down there cheaper.
Yeah, as much as you tried, there was still no way to get the price down to be competitive. And that is, we say buy American, and yet we weren't buying American. And that's the downfall of so many of our companies that we have done books on, is the fact that the foreign competition just wiped us out. And we needed to be aware of that. And yet when they would go to the federal government, when the unions would go to the federal government and ask for protection, they couldn't get it. They could not get it. Or they would give them pennies. Yeah, well, we'll attach 5 cents on their steel coming in. That still didn't do anything. It didn't make a difference. Now, let me tell you a story from one gentleman. Was there stealing? He was told to he's summer labor, he was told to get a wheelbarrow and take the trash up to the building and leave the wheelbarrow there. So he got a brand new wheelbarrow, gathered the trash, took it up to the building, left the wheelbarrow there and the trash, and the security guard said, "Are you stealing that wheelbarrow?" He said, "No, I was told to get this and take it up to the trash building and leave it." He said, "Well, it's gone. You stole it." Years later, that security man saw that individual and he said, "Now, we're both gone. Tell me the truth. Did you steal that wheelbarrow?" He said, "Absolutely not." He said, "Well, every day they sent up wheelbarrows full of trash. Every wheelbarrow was new and it was gone by the end of the day." They were stealing them. And they would tell these summer workers to do this, and the summer workers are completely unaware of what's going on, and they would do that. So I'm going to let Roseanna finish for you. She's going to talk about some of the individuals. Yes, sir. You certainly may.
One thing you said that most of the bill was just machine run. I worked in galvanized. That wasn't machine run.
Okay.
We pulled a pipe out of a molten metal.
Right.
Code.
Yeah.
And we glued it up, it never allowed that. I mean, there was a lot more than just pushing buttons in that thing.
Okay. And that's why you're here, to correct me. Because I didn't work there.
When you say that's machine run, that's a misspelling.
Okay.
And you guys still never did.
This is, most of you guys probably have one of these, a 5 million ton. Yeah. 5 million tons.
Yeah, we got one.
Sorry, Sean. Tearing the place up. This was 1968, right? Yeah, and that was their 5 million ton of steel that they produced.
So we galvanized it. We pulled them
Okay.
out of the hot metal part. That was late. Trust me, it wasn't pushing buttons. So
Okay.
let's get the story a little bit more
Okay. No problem. Anyway, I didn't work there, but you did. And Roseanna's going to tell some stories. Okay. Let me get you set for the next one. Okay, you're set.
So glad all of you came. Nice turnout. Can't talk about the steel mill without talking about Undos. But Undos wasn't always Undos, was it? How many of you remember the original name of Undos? No? Kramer's Nut House. It's Kramer, I remember my dad was a milkman for Garvin's. And he'd talk about his different stops, and he'd come out and talk about delivering to a place called Kramer's Nut House. And as a little girl, I thought, what kind of grocery store is that? No, Undo's restaurant was originally Kramer's Nut House. And Undo bought it in 1972 for $10,000. It had dirt floors, 10 bar stools, a pot-bellied stove for heating. After Undo owned the building for 1 week in 1972, there was a major flood, and the business flooded. There were 3 shifts a day working at the Benwood Mill, and 100 people would come in to get a drink on each shift at least. The street would be piled up, backed up on Fridays on payday, because they would cash the checks and charge $3 to cash the checks. Herxbar Shane told us it was estimated they made $40,000 a week just for cashing checks. And the management at Kramer's Nut House, or Undo's, would make 3 trips to the bank on Fridays with the money they were bringing in from cashing the checks of the workers. And of course, some of the workers stopped to have those Boilermakers that we talked about earlier. The name of the bar was changed from Kramer's Nut House first to Kramer Stag Bar. Women were not allowed in there. It was men only. During the mill boom of 76 to 79, the mill made the 4-inch pipe for the oil business in Houston. It was called casting. How many of you were working there when you were making casting?
Casing.
Casing? Okay. Casing, how many of you worked there then? Number of you worked there? Benwood was the only mill that made it and shipped it out left and right across the country. Did you know that? You were the only ones making it. And they were the first to produce that specialized 4-inch pipe in the United States. At that time, Herc said the business could hold up to 80 people and had 4 or 5 tables and 15 bar stools. Other people stood outside. Some stayed inside. Do you remember what the beer of choice was back then? Black Label. Black Label beer. Well, in 1978, they decided to expand the business and start allowing women into the business. They could start seeing the decline of the mill coming, and they knew times were changing, and they were going to have to change their business. And so that's when they started thinking about expanding the bar and turning it more into a restaurant business, a restaurant type business. It said when the mill closed in 1982, they talked to a restaurateur, got a few recipes for some specialized sandwiches, and it became Mondo's Restaurant, and then they expanded from there. Undo's, as you know, is one of the big sponsors of the Italian Festival in the Valley, and is a mainstay business.
Into the mic.
A mainstay business into the Valley. The Benwood Mill was a family affair. Many families worked there. One of the main families was the Warzinskis. How many of you worked with a Warzinski at a time in the mill? when we got information on the Brzezinski family, it was said that Theodore Brzezinski was Louis Stubenrau's son-in-law, and he came into the mill during the Civil War to make metal for the Union forces, and then eventually rose to the position of assistant plant manager. The dynasty took hold when all 8 of the brothers, it's in the top of the picture, worked at the mill at the same time. You can see the generations there of the Brzezinski family. They know for sure there were 4. When they gave us this article that had been written, there had been 4 generations of Brzezinskis that worked at that mill, starting back before the Civil War, and then came up to these cousins that were working there. The cousins were William, Theodore Jr., Thomas, John, and Albert. Now, I don't have any information on whether any of their sons worked there to make it a 5th generation. Yes, ma'am?
I just wanted to ask you, when Kramer's, there was a man I knew that his last name was Kramer's. When they owned the bar, but when it became Undo's, it wasn't the same owner, correct?
No, Undo was Undo's Sparshane.
Okay.
Yes, the Kramers sold it to the Sparshanes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that clarification. The next family I want to talk about is the Raymond family. We have one of those ancestors here sitting in the room. Roberta Raymond is here in the center, in the red. Raise your hand, Roberta. Because Roberta gave us a lot of pictures that are in this book that came from her father. In fact, on the cover of the book, this front picture, we call it the Italian Mafia picture. And I say that lovingly because that's what the family calls it. This is Roberta's father, Tony Raymond. This is Jaja DeCrease. I'll be talking about him as well. These men all were, this is a convention in Atlantic City that these men were all present at as union officials. This gentleman down here is Al Beecher from Moundsville. I'll be talking about him as well too. The Raymonds, there were actually 8 brothers that worked there at one time. There was an article done called The Brothers of Steel, the Wheeling News Register. 7 of the brothers that were taken in this picture are Luigi Raymond, born in 1905, Joseph Peanuts Raymond, born in 1906, Angelo Raymond, born in 1911, Samuel Raymond in 1913, Ernest Squint Raymond in 1914, Tony Raymond, 1916, and Frank Raymond, 1922. A younger brother, John Raymond, also worked there for a while before he went to work at Allied Chemical. So the 8 brothers all worked there, and then there were 2 sisters. Their father, Joseph Raymond, was killed in the explosion in the Benwood mine in 1924, where many, many men in the Benwood, Balts Run, and Meccan communities lost their lives. Those names are all listed in this book as well. That explosion and death left Assunta Raymond with 10 children to raise. She eventually remarried Carl Padula, who became stepfather of these 10 children. He also worked at Wheeling Steel. And then these 8 Raymond boys all worked at the mill. The older boys attended St. John's Parochial School. They went to the 8th grade, that's as far as they went, and then they went to work at the mill. The younger boys went to Union High School. Most of them finished school, and then they went to work at the mill. 5 of these boys served in World War II, and then came back to their jobs in the mill. Tony Raymond's in this picture, second from the right. He was one of the union presidents, served for many, many years. The mother became the custodian of all the earnings when these boys were first working to keep the family in food and clothes. But she liked for her boys to have a good time too. And so a nickel could give you a ride on the streetcar, or a nickel could get you into the Nickelodeon. And often the family would get all cleaned up and dressed up and ride the streetcar to go to Bel Air and to go to the show, to the Nickelodeon, to see the movies. To earn extra money, they like to pick blackberries. They picked them in the hills behind their town, at Benwood, and sold them to the nice ladies that belonged to the Women's Christian Temperance Union, who made them into preserves. Or they also served them to the equally nice ladies who would turn them into wine. There were black walnuts to be picked. And so the Raymond boys and girls often ended up with the dark hands of those that have ever picked black walnuts. Now you end up invariably getting the stained hands that last for a week or so. Luigi and Angelo at one time operated the Dinky engines. How many of you remember the Dinky engines inside the mill? Dinky engines were used to take the giant molds around, the molds that were filled with the white hot steel from the Bessemer converters. At the same time, Tony was operating the switches that let the Dinky locomotives travel to where they were desired to go. Luigi worked in the scalp mill. The scalp was the name applied to the strips of steel which are formed into pipe. And at one time, those strips were quite short. Now they became longer and continuously welded together as the need of the customer changed. Joseph Raymond early on went into quality control, becoming an inspector. Angelo learned bricklaying, painting, rigging, and locomotive operations. And Samuel specialized in shipping. Ernest and Tony both became crane followers, directing the distant operators of the crane and the material handling, and both men were particularly active in the union movement. Ernest was on the grievance committee, and Tony was president of the union. Frank showed an early interest in becoming a carpenter and became specialized in that field. And now what not everyone realizes it, there's a lot of carpentry work about any steel mill, and he was kept quite busy. He took those skills and also built his own home in Benwood. It's right across the street from the mill where he walked to work every day. Al Beecher. How many of you remember working with Al Beecher? Al's son Ted and his wife Mary's who gave us this story. Of course, Al passed. Al worked in the mill from 1945 to 1980. He was born in the house located directly across the mill on Marshall Street. And he talked about workers would open the side doors of the east blast furnace and light up the entire field hillside of the plant. And he and his friends could go out and play football at midnight. During the Great Depression, Al's grandmother ran a boarding house right across the street from the mill. When Al was 17 years old, he quit school, lied about his age, and went into World War II. Served in Europe, and when he came home, after a short work for a dry cleaner, he was hired at Wheeling Steel. The first day on the job, he was near a blast furnace. And the area was filled with steam and smoke, and you couldn't see a thing. And all at once, this little German man with several fingers missing from his both hands came out of the steam and said, "What kind of hunky are you?" He said, "Dad, all he said the trademark of a mill worker was missing fingers." Al worked on the slitter. That was where the coils of steel were cut to the desired width for the customer, and they came out of the furnace. The coil slitter or roll slitter is a process where a large master coil was sent through a set of circular wheels. These shears that are used then for the predetermined width cut the coil into a series of narrow rolls. The slit coil was then put through a roller to flatten and to make it into the desired size pipe. He then bid on a job in the galvanizing department, where he became the head operator. And galvanizing was a manufacturing process where coating of zinc was applied to steel or iron to protect and prevent rusting. They talked about a lengthy strike, occurred in the 60s, lasted for 6 months. They said they remember Bill Medovec letting them use a credit card, or not a credit card, just credit, and now paying for the bill in full once he was back to work. They said that's the way it was in Benwood. Everyone helped everyone else. Al talked about John Green, who was highly revered as a union leader. They built a building for the Steelworkers Union on Water Street. He said at one time, Al was standing under a steel welder in the mill when the bolts came loose and fell down on his head. Thankfully, he was wearing his hard hat and only incurred a slight cut to his head. He received the Turtle Award that was given by the company who manufactured the hard hats, and they still have that turtle pin. He also talked about Kramer's Nut House. So it was a favorite hangout both before and after work. Said Firebox was the name of the bartender. He said, this was Ted Beecher telling this story, the son. He said, "I used to go in with Dad because he was cashing his paychecks at Kramer's. In fact," he said, "there was a hole in the corrugated siding on the mill building across from Kramer's where 6 packs of beer and food were readily passed into the workers on the afternoon shift. Those workers were thirsty in all that heat." Al worked 35 years at the Benwood Mill, and when he saw that the plant was going in decline, he bid on a guard's job because he thought a guard's job would be one that would last till the end. Al had a reputation for being a very good and conscientious worker, made sure he reported for work every day he was scheduled, and even went to work when he was ill. His son said, "I think he might have missed 2 days in the 35 years that he worked." You don't find that kind of dedication these days. When the mill closed in '82, Dad was no longer needed. He worked for a few years with his son installing carpet. He said, "Dad said, someday, when these steel mills are all closing, we will be taken over." He said, "I think my dad's right." And the last person I want to talk about is Jaja DeCrease. How many of you know where Jaja DeCrease lives in Benwood, where he lived? He lived right across the street from Undo's restaurant. It's the blue duplex that sits right across from the mill, across from Undo's, sort of under the Blair Bridge. Mike Joseph Jaja DeCrease was born 1917. He was one of 7 children. His dad died at the age of 42, and Jaja went to work in the steel mill. Jaja also served in World War II for 4 years. While he, I know. While he was in World War II, his mother died. Of course, there was no coming home for bereavement in those days, so he could not come home to pay respects to his mother. He was in his declining years when I met him. As the gentleman introduced us, as I volunteer for Valley Hospice, and I was privileged to serve as one of Jaja's caregivers for 18 months at the end of his life. And so it was a privilege to have this man tell me his story about working in the mill. He said he ran the threading machine from 34 to 42. He hand-threaded sockets and couplings at the end of threaded pipe that would be used for water and gas lines of various sizes. He operated electrical threading machines and coupling machines and set up the machines, making the necessary adjustments. Then he went in and served in World War II. When he returned to Benwood and his job at the mill, he was amazed at how much the mill had expanded. He married, had 3 daughters, and finished his job at the mill, retiring in 1979. He's one of the few that were blessed to end his career before the mill ended. Mike, typical of many steelworkers, gave back to the community. During his entire life, he's working as a steelworker. He also coached St. John's grade school football and basketball teams. He served on Benwood City Council for several years and remained active in his church, the Benwood St. John's Catholic Church. He also worked at Undo's. He and Undo's Shane were best friends, and he worked there up until his late 80s. Even at the age of 93, Undo would come and get him on Monday nights and take him over to the restaurant for steak night. And Jaja looked forward to that steak and that salad and that baked potato. His desire, he was born in that house that I described earlier. He watched the Blair Bridge be built when he was 7 years old. His desire was to die in that house, and his daughters made that happen. True to all you that live in Benwood, Bolts Run, McMecken, the community means so much to you. This man was typical of that. That was his dying wish, just to die in his community, in his home, in his bed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question was, he died in 2012.
That's very best. My dad was born in 1917.
Got a couple minutes. Any questions from anybody or comments
I
or?
have a comment. My father worked for Wheeling Steel up the river, down to Benwood, and he never stole anything. He borrowed. He borrowed a lot of things. In fact, his name was Walter Soha. He passed about 15 years ago or so. And my husband said to him, Walter, where did you get that really long pipe wrench? He was a pipe fitter. And my dad said, oh, I borrowed it from Wheeling Steel. And Dad said, how did you get it out of the mill? And he said, oh, I put it down my pants leg and then I went to my car and went home.
Chuck? Go ahead, Chuck.
First of all, I want to thank you guys for all the work you did. My wife wanted to be here today, but she couldn't make it. Her dad's in here several times. The lad moved me silly, and he was a councilman in Benwood. And my mother also worked with St. John's, and her 2 brothers worked there. But talking about Undo's and Kramer's, there used to be a plaque down there. I don't think it's at Undo's anymore. Everybody had a nickname in
Yes, they
Benwood.
did.
Yes.
And a lot of times, the the son's got the nickname of the dad, so
Yeah.
my father-in-law and her two brothers were all called Moon. It's kind of confusing, but, talk about the hole in the wall, guys told me about that.
The first takeout, that's what, her call it, first takeout.
Mr. Kramer had a nickname, they called him Super. And I was told that's because he also sold some kind of vacuum cleaner. And it was called Super something, so he was Super. And like I say, everybody had a nickname. And the Winskys, Tom Berry, who's from Mountville, is a good friend of mine. I told him about his father-in-law was one of the Winskys. And his wife worked, when they were married, she worked up there at the Whitting Pit office in Wheeling. So, and one last thing, I see Kirk talks about the Flamingo. If you know anything about the Flamingo, it was all 24/7. But in the back was a high-stakes card game. And my father-in-law was the house man for Hyundai. And her brother, she don't really remember, but her older brother, he made more money Friday and Saturday nights dealing with cars for Hundo than he did working at the mill Monday through Friday. And the last thing, they never bought a flashlight or light bulb. They borrowed it in the mill.
A lot of borrowing going on there, yeah. A lot of borrowing. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was hired in Yorkville Mill in June '73, worked a little while, they laid me off, and they said, we're off your, interbank transfer. We're gonna send you to Benwood. I'll never forget it, they put me in the socket shop, the sockets and all that, oil splattering all over it. I was glad to get back to Yorkville Mill.
Want to thank everyone for coming today. Oh, Dr. Wilson.
That you undersold the excitement of watching that pipe curling up to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Because I was the guy that was standing there and was doing it right beside me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, and he did. He had safety buttons, neither one worked. I looked over at the control panel. He wasn't there. So if y'all remember the line, he had to run down up over the bridge, get the control panel. By that time, the foreman got there. You're still only maybe down an hour or so. The highest paid guy in the plant, running the furnace, was asleep or something, wasn't paying attention. He burned the scalp through in the middle of the furnace. Wow. And here I am, 21-year-old kid, I'm standing there like this, wondering what's gonna happen. Foreman asked me what happened, didn't say a word, never had a word the next day. The union rep came over and asked me what happened, and I told him, last I ever heard of it. I never got put back up on the hot bench.
Did any of you guys work for the railroad? So, I worked in the steel industry my entire life. I spent 7 years in Benwood, union and management. We were running 4-inch casing, and the railroads and all these mills run the mill. If you don't have a railroad, you don't run. So they're very special. They do whatever they want. On this particular day, we're running 4-inch casing, and we had about an hour and 15 minutes on one rail where we had 3 cars to fill up. This is getting primary. Same thing on the other side. So we had 6 cars. So we had about 2 hours and 30 minutes or so before we're totally full. Well, we make a switch out of there every 3 cars. Nice summer afternoon, looked out of the scale house, or the engine sitting down there. We made a switch for 3 cars, nothing was happening. So I get down there and I'm asking one of the hookers. By this time I'm the boss. I'm asking one of the hookups, what's going on? He goes, well, we made a switch. I said, well, I'm going to take these other cars. I'm going to switch the other side too. So I walk down there. They're all down there playing cards, drinking beer, having a good time. And there was a particular guy, he was giving me a bunch of grief. And I must have had a lot of adrenaline because when he pulled his 25 automatic on me, and I took the table where they're all sitting and put it against the wall. I told him, get the hell out of there, go make my switch. Now just ignore this, otherwise you're all fired. From then on, I got switches whenever I asked for. I mean, it was like crazy. But those guys did run the mill. You couldn't do anything without them. So thank you for all you guys working.
Yes, sir.
One more comment.
Good
This
job.
one's over to here.
I have a question, you said when you are still on Brazil.
Yeah.
Did the government of Brazil subsidize that in some way?
More than likely, I would imagine so. Yeah, our government wouldn't subsidize or cut or give us decent tariffs. And so because of that, they couldn't compete because the tariffs were so low. And we got that with Fostoria glass and all that too, that the tariffs were there, but the government was like 5-cent tariff for a piece of glass. And you can't, they're producing glass for $1 a plate, 5-cent tariff on it. You couldn't produce that stuff either. I mean, it's an issue. I know it's noon or 1 o'clock, and I thank you all for coming. We're working on Reynolds Memorial Hospital is our next one, Memories of Reynolds. Our latest one is Memories of Fostoria Glass, and I'm hoping Sean invites us back for that one. That's our biggest book of 353 pages and 250 pictures, and we love that. So we are doing, I hope, a great service to all of you, and we brought back a lot of memories today. And thank you all for coming, and if I didn't get something right, well, just shoot me. Okay.